This is a topic that I consider to be a very sacred topic that I hate to talk about. And the reason that I hate to talk about it, because when you usually go to gatherings, when people talk about this, everybody comes out feeling nice, but you're not moved to do anything. And I hate talking about this kind of thing where it becomes something to just dangle in the air. And you look at it, you say, oh, that's pretty. And you feel good for a while. And then you go back home and life goes back to normal. And I don't know how to deliver this in such a way that this doesn't end up being the same thing, where we talk about love and we all feel good, flower power, that kind of stuff. And then we go home, life is back to normal. And it is actually one of my missions. I can say it. One of my missions to prove that this sentiment is actually the most powerful force in the universe. Okay, I'm not doing my best to do that, but yes, it is my mission. Now that I can say it, I'm going to be very embarrassed if I don't do something about it, because I have all of you as a witness, hearing me having said that. And I'm not just talking about feel-good kind of love where you think about love in such a way that it makes you just so that you can feel good. But you think about love in such a way that you would think about the most powerful energy in the universe, the most powerful energy in existence. I'm not saying it just to be poetic. I'm not saying it that it's the most powerful thing so that I can trick you so you can finally, because I think that's what we feel like when these places, these communities, this gathering, when they talk about love and they talk about how wonderful it is, how powerful it is. I feel I'm being tricked. I'm being tricked to take on this very weak thing and then being presented as the most powerful thing. In my own experience, I know that when I try to love, I only get pain. Well, that's the thing that you notice. But you probably don't take notice into the other wonderful things that are happening. So we come to conclude that it is a weakness. It's a weakness that it would be nice if we all together decide, okay, let's all be weak together, then it would be a wonderful thing. But if it's just me allowing myself to be weak in this world where there are a bunch of wolves, I don't think I want to take this thing on. So it doesn't seem like power. So when someone says this is the most powerful thing, it feels like they're tricking me. It's like, go ahead, put it on so I can see that if you don't get killed while you have it. Then if I see that you don't die from taking it, that nobody kills you, you're not run over, then maybe that might give me the confidence so that I can say, oh yeah, there's something in it. I think that's one of the reasons why we proselytize. Yeah, that's the word you have. I can only say it very fast. I can't say it slow. And don't ask me to repeat it. I think that's one of the reasons that's done. That's done, I think, as a way to look for others to corroborate. Oh, if I can convince you to accept this, then I can. That will help me get rid of my doubt. If I see you also being also upholding this, and I think it's the same thing that happens with love. And you hear there are different kinds of love for material things, love for people, love for close ones, love for friends. The way I think it's ancient Greek civilization, they had different words for different kinds of love. Well, we have this like agape and those other kinds of things. Love is just love. And that's the reason that we use that one word, because there is a feeling that we feel that is common to when we say, I love this. I love this this brand new sparkling water we just discovered. And when I say, there's something similar to saying that, to say, I love my mother. There's something similar in those two things. Okay, they're not the same thing, but there's something similar that makes me say, I love this brand new sparkling water, and I say, I love my mother. So I'm not so much into dissecting love into saying, oh, there's this kind of love, there's that kind of love. There's just love. And when we think we have love, and there are barriers, there are restrictions, and it's not love yet. You got something else. Don't you dare call it love. Not in my presence. It's too sacred for you to call that love. If it's love, from the very beginning, it will always remain love, no matter what happens. If it changes, it was never love in the first place. It was something else, something that we were confused about, and that we thought it was love. We were calling it love. But I rather would say that love has different dimensions to it. Okay, and especially the topic about unconditional love. When this feeling, this thing, this experience, when it looks at the world, and it sees a certain thing, when it looks at suffering, we call it compassion. When it desires the object of its direction, where it's that it's holding, we call it love. When it takes great joy in seeing others happy, we call it sympathetic joy. And when it understands the nature of what it is perceiving, we call it equanimity. But it's all just one thing, but having different dimensions to it. Okay. And these different dimensions have to be looked at, have to be supported, have to be nurtured, so that they support each other, so that we don't experience what we consider to be the weakness of loving someone. Okay. It's because of the other components, the other dimensions are not there, are not present to support it. That's why it seems to be weak. And sometimes it seems to be selfish, sometimes, because of certain components. The other components of it are not present, are not healthy, so to speak. Okay. And why do we even have to say, why do we even have to put the word unconditional in front of it? So when you take away the unconditional love, and it becomes conditional love, in my worldview, that you're not talking about love anymore. You're talking about something else. Conditional love is not love. You can borrow the word love if you want, but don't you dare call it love. Love is unconditional in its nature. That's it, point blank. And why do we find that unconditional love is something beautiful to aspire to, and yet we are afraid of it? Why do we need courage to love? Believe it or not, it is because of, I might call, the misunderstanding of those different components of love. Sometimes through compassion being taken as a separate entity, a separate phenomena all by itself, disconnected from the other perspectives, and it becomes unbearable. And because of it doesn't have the other components to help compassion deal with seeing the reality of suffering, then suffering creates fear. And when joy becomes imbalance, then it becomes frivolous. And when wanting another to be happy becomes imbalance, not having equanimity to balance it, then that's when we allow ourselves to become doormats. And then we become afraid of love. Since we've had this functional relationship with this divine spark within us, every once in a while it calls us. Every once in a while it asks us to allow it to manifest through us. And because of the misunderstanding, because of the imbalance, we misunderstand what's taking place. And we develop a sense of hesitation, a sense of fear. And now we have to use such word as, now we need courage to love. And the reason that we need courage to love is because, you know why we need courage to love? What needs courage to love? It's ego. Ego needs courage to love. So when you feel the need to have courage to love, that means our ego is present. And what is ego here? And not to go into confusing philosophical terms, it's basically misunderstanding, looking at a story and thinking of it as a self. Looking at history, looking at the past, and thinking that you have discovered something substantial. And I don't want to use the word false self because immediately the mind thinks, oh, false self, there must be a real self. And when you think there's a real self, not understanding what the false self is, now we take where we might end up having understanding of real self, we just apply false self to it. If you understand, if you get my drift. So all these things have to, and there's also this understanding of reality, this common sense understanding that must be present also. And as babies, because we tried it out, we didn't fully understand it, we became afraid, and now we keeping distance, but we still have this attraction for it because of this. Something within us is nagging us, something is telling us that there's something wonderful in that, we have to go get it. But we don't fully understand it, so we stay away from it. And what is this baby? It's, again, ego. Somehow we believe our idea of who we are is truly who we are. That's the ego. And thinking that this ego is something that perpetuates through time, perpetuates through space. And is dictating whether or not we should take on this. And do you know why ego is afraid of unconditional love? Ego is afraid of unconditional love because the very experience of unconditional love means ego must be obliterated. Of course, ego is going to be afraid of love. Of course, ego is going to tell you, it's going to trick you, making you think that, if you want to do that, you have to be very courageous. It's ego being afraid. If you go into that, you're gonna have to kill me, and I don't want to die. I don't want to be destroyed. So it's ego's needing courage, not that courage is needed necessarily for that to happen. So since ego is present anyway, so we have to trick ego. We have to go at it in stages. Yes, there are levels of ego that we're not even aware of. Very, very, very tricky. Sometimes ego might come in and say, oh, let me guide you on how to develop unconditional love. Ego can't help you. Because for unconditional love to be present, to be experienced, ego has to go away. Not just take a vacation and come back. Ego has to be destroyed. And even just what I've just said is a lie. Ego cannot be destroyed. Do you know why ego cannot be destroyed? Ego doesn't exist in the first place. Now, I don't want this to be the last time I did something close to this. I lost it. I just remembered. I lost it, and it became I was just recalling the experience of. But this time, I don't want you just to have a feeling where you say, "Oh man, that was powerful, man." And then you go home, nothing changes. This is not going to be the delivery of my delivery of the topic of love that's going to make everyone here go home and then go and truly start changing the world, changing your life. But I would like this to be the spark of it. So ego is already there. We have to deal with it. And the way to deal with it, the same way somebody's growing up, they're a baby. You can't just treat them like an adult. You have to understand that they're a baby. And there's certain lessons for that baby to learn, for that being to learn, has to be presented in a way a baby can understand it. And don't let, you know what I'm going to say, and I can feel you're going to be doing that stuff with me, okay? I don't want your false spirituality, I don't want your false spirituality to come here and say, I don't need that. Ego is present. Ego is a baby. It has to be treated as such so we can grow, so we can overcome it, so we can transcend it. The reason that we don't find ourselves 24 hours a day seeking to have this unconditional love is because we're not convinced of its power. We're not convinced of its worth. We're not convinced of its value. That's it. That's the bottom line. This little feeling that you have, it's mere poetic. It's nice if someone else has it, really. And that's what we are saying. Unconditional love is a beautiful thing. When I hear about it, the Buddha had it, Jesus had it, whoever had it. It was beautiful to think about. But deep inside, we think it is a weakness. Admit it. Okay? And it is a conviction that we have. And the only way for us to overcome this is to overcome this conviction that it is not worth it. And how do you overcome this conviction, this conviction that it is not worth it? Overcome it with a different conviction that it is worth it. Is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to live, to abide with unconditional love as a way of relating with all life? Not just the people who are nice to you, not just the people who can benefit you, even the people who are coming at you to destroy you. That's what unconditional means. Without condition, I'm going to love. Not only when you're benefiting me, even when you are not benefiting me, even when you're intentionally trying to harm me. If I have unconditional love, I'm going to love you. Are you ready to do that? Do you see that as a possibility? Do you see that as something worth having? That's the baby step. I'm calling it the baby step because that's what it is. And then the forced spirituality of thinking, I don't need to consider the benefits of it. I already know what it is. No, you don't know what it is. You're not convinced yet. We're not convinced yet. I'm not convinced yet. Here I am talking about it's my mission to prove the power of love. What am I waiting for? What am I waiting for to start? I'm not convinced yet. I've been hurt before when I try to love, when I have compassion. I cannot deny these experiences. How do I reconcile these experiences within having unconditional love? Because the world's not going to suddenly stop being what it is because now I have unconditional love. They're going to leave me alone. The world is going to continue to be the way it is. And because the world is going to continue to be the way it is, and if I relate with them with love in such a way without boundary, without limit, then that's why you can call it unconditional love. If the world has to change in order for me to love it, then it's not unconditional love. And that's what we have to admit. We're not convinced. Okay, I'm going to give us babies and help. How do we become convinced? Every single problem you have, say it's because love is not present, or love was not present. Every single thing that we want to accomplish in the world, that we would like to have in society, that we like to have countries loving each other. I mean, countries not necessarily loving each other, being in harmony with each other. Communities building up, staying strong. Economy getting strong. Health. Barriers being breaking. And also physical health. Not just mental health, not just psychological health, but health in all the ways that we can consider. Health in the environment, health in our bodies, health in our mind. We have to see how these results are connected to unconditional love. We have to see it. Not just hypothetical, because the conviction that I want to arrive at myself, and I think I'm afraid of arriving at it. Maybe that's why. Maybe unconditional love is a weakness. That's why I flirt with it, get close to it, and keep my distance. Because I'm afraid of that conviction that I have might be true. And that's why I'm afraid. That's why I hesitate to approach it. Because somewhere deep within me, I see it. That is, if it is true that it is such a power, it is truly the answer to all problems. Because there are problems. And if you don't see problems, you're not enlightened. Okay? It's not because you're enlightened you don't see problems. If you don't see problems, you're opposite of enlightened. You're completely blind. Sorry. This idea that once you become enlightened, you don't see problems anymore. I have such strong thing against that. I'm holding back because I want to say some words that I shouldn't be saying. This is being recorded. If the Buddha could say samsara is a cesspool, I'm giving myself permission to say it. If once you become enlightened, you can't see problems anymore, that's bullshit, okay? And I can understand why someone could want enlightenment to be like that. Because we are confused about what compassion is. And we are confused about the dynamic of how these things help and support each other. Compassion helps us see reality for what it is. Joy anchors compassion, so compassion doesn't become too self-absorbed into itself. Love gives hope. Joy is recognizing that it's not all bad. And equanimity balances everybody, making sure everybody is not overdoing it, over self-absorbed. And everybody I'm talking about, all those different components of unconditional love. So once we become convinced about unconditional love is something to aspire to, it's actually, and it's not like what you call that, snake oil salesman? Do you know that expression? You should know that expression. Snake oil salesman. Is that too ancient of a term for some people? Google it. Okay, it's not like a snake oil pitch where telling you that love will solve everything. It's not that. I'm telling you the truth. Love will solve everything. And the kind of love that you're thinking about that will not solve everything, that's not love. Okay? Because love is balanced. It comes with all the components to keep itself healthy. All the components must be attended to. When compassion is becoming overwhelming, you need to go to joy. Look at the same way you're looking at suffering, and it is suffering, and you're having compassion, a wish, a wanting to do something about it, moved by it. That same direct seeing needs to directly see, there is joy also. There's happiness. There are beings engaged in beautiful things. Beings doing wonderful things. And that will help balance compassion. So we're taking the baby step. We pass. Now we are toddlers. We are convinced about it. Now we're starting to actually cultivate it. And in cultivating it, and I have to go back to the topic that we talked about last time, trust, and I have to talk about it in a twist. For those of you who were there last time, I'm good that you're here now. Because asking the question, should I trust this? Should I trust that? Should I trust him? Should I trust her? We are completely missing the point. We should never ask that question. If you find yourself asking that question, you're completely disconnected with something. You're disconnected with your own truth. Just be connected to your truth. Then that's it. You don't have to ask that question. Should you go? Should you go? Should you not go? Your truth will tell you. And how is this connected? Let's begin with compassion, looking at suffering. But not just the suffering of another, but one's own suffering, one's own pain. What is our pain telling us? Our pain is telling us a truth. And the truth is, what it's telling us, believe it or not, is that you are a powerful being. Your pain is telling you you're a powerful being. Joy should tell you that, but it's not as powerful as pain. Because joy you want. Pain you don't want, and yet you're experiencing it. Now, how powerful are you to be able to do that? That's the most powerful thing, I think, in the universe. Well, the principle, I mean. The fact that we experience pain. Because here you are having an experience. At the same time you're having it, there's a wanting not to experience it, and yet you're experiencing it. Isn't that powerful? So that tells you, once you set something in motion, it's very difficult for it to be undone. And that's what you should have trust in. When you act, you marry yourself to something. And eventually it will be a mirror. It will tell you the most beautiful truth. Pain tells us you were not sincere in your intention. What's your intention? Pain tells us there was something you misunderstood that you thought you understood. check your understanding again. Since you acted, you put your hand in the... it was so nice when I thought about it immediately. You put your hand in, but now that I'm going to say it, it's going to sound lame. Put your hand in the creative soup. I told you it was going to be lame, but when I was thinking about it in my misunderstanding, it was the most beautiful thing. You put your hand in the creative soup and then you build something. That's what happens whenever we act. So you can, in a theistic way, you could consider action to be God. Whenever you're acting, you are God. You are creating. Don't let that create. Don't let the ego take over this. What I just said. Okay. Whenever we act, we are creating, and that's the thing that we have to trust. We have to trust that action is creating. So when we are personally suffering, a mirror is being presented to us. You misunderstood something. You didn't really know what your intentions were, or your intentions were not as clear as you thought. And this is something that we have to allow ourselves to really think about in the midst of that pain. The stronger the pain, the more we have to really see, oh, wow, I'm really, really, really powerful. That I could create such an intense experience. And when we see others going through pain, and I'm not going to go into that personal responsibility stuff in terms of someone causes another one pain. I'm not going to go into that. Okay, so don't ask any question about that. But when you see someone going through pain, you can understand that they acted, they created something, but not in the sense of, oh, it's your stuff, you deal with it kind of thing. But we can empathize. We can understand, just like when we are going through it, we were wishing that we would not go into this pain. In the same way, we can understand that's the same thing that's happening to the other person. And that will allow us to be able to connect. Okay. And that connection is breaking something. It's breaking the barrier that ego sets up. Because ego wants us to have the sense of being, to be living in our own universe. And sorry, there's no such thing as our own universe. And when we live with ego, that sense of separation becomes it has a real sense to it. And why are we able to experience separation? What happened? We put our hands in the creation soup. And we created this illusion, beautiful illusion, very convincing illusion that we are separate. But when you're able to connect, when you're able to sympathize with someone, able to understand how you are, what's happening is it's you happening over there. We break that barrier, we break the illusion, not completely, but we break some part of it that give us a sense to be able to connect. And that's why compassion comes up. Compassion, an aspect of unconditional love, is when we break the barrier where we can allow ourselves to feel another person's pain. And the only way we can feel another person's pain is because there is no separation. If there was complete separation, we would not be able to experience it. So don't become overwhelmed when you have this direct knowledge of someone else's pain. It's the most beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful experience to be able to have that. A barrier is broken. An illusion is shattered. Now you're connecting with someone. You're having direct experience of connection is real. So the sense of ego is damaged a little bit. The sense of absolute separation is damaged. Ego may come up and then give its own interpretation of the situation. But for that moment of actually being able to have compassion, ego is damaged a little bit. And it is in the experience of suffering, that's where fear can come up. That's where fear comes up, actually. In our misunderstanding of connection. I know some people who having experienced compassion to the point where they feel the pain of the other person in them, and not knowing what to do with this experience, they shut down. This beautiful gift, they see it as a curse, and they build a wall so that they don't have this experience again. And I can understand why, because compassion wants the suffering to go away, and in your experience at that moment, you don't see your resources where you can make that suffering go away. So it's natural, as a result of that condition, to build a wall. So as a toddler, don't be like a baby. When you feel someone else's pain, it's knowledge. Intimate, the most intimate kind of knowledge you can ever have. It is sacred to be able to have this. Look within you for resources. And in the very search for resources, in the very aspiration for resources, that is the path of actually finding them. Don't worry about not being able to have them immediately at your disposal. Don't think that this is something to put aside that you can deal with. The more intense the pain, the more damage has been done to ego. And when ego has been damaged severely, be careful. There's a danger of ego responding with equal might, strengthening itself, calcifying itself, making itself even much more difficult to deal with next time. So if you are one of those very unique beings, understand that it is a gift. It's not a gift like in the sense that someone thought you worthy of it and give it to you. You worked hard for it. You worked desperately hard for it. You worked hard at breaking down the walls of your ego to be able to have that experience. It's a precious gift. Honor it. Yes, it's painful, but it's not your pain. It's a direct, intimate knowledge of something. No other way that you could know this. Not to be overwhelmed by the knowledge of pain and understanding how pain is a mirror, is a teacher. Then this lopsided understanding that to wallow in it is the spiritual thing to do, where you become weak, truly weak, not able to do anything about it, just wallow. wallow. Take a moment to directly experience things that brings joy. That will balance it. Elon Musk is has some beautiful ideas, if that's what brings you joy. If the fact that some kid is creating, is trying to invent something to clean the ocean, if that brings you joy, take joy in that. These are things that are actually happening. One thing you need to do, you can't fool your mind, really. Our minds, believe it or not, are truth testers. Yeah, even though we are disconnected from truth a lot, we find ourselves mostly lying to ourselves. But deeply, the mind is a truth tester. So when you think of these examples of joy, and you're not convinced that there are examples of joy, if you just think about things that are abstract, the truth tester will know. And and there will not be a true joy to counter, to balance the overwhelming experience of that compassion is bringing into your life. So really, sincerely take joy. And for those of us who are raised to feel guilty when we feel joy, think of it as this kind of joy is the joy that actually will help you become a better servant of others. Now, let's go into some of the things that makes you feel, oh, this was powerful, man. It's so beautiful, man. Let's look at, now we are adults. We have unconditional love. But before we get there, we will have slight experiences of it. The thing is to become so familiar with it that consider that is the only way to relate with life. That is the only way to relate with living beings, with nature. There's no wisdom in thinking that other than unconditional love, there are more appropriate ways of relating. You have to come to the conviction that the only way to relate is through unconditional love. The only way to relate. That way, when you are loving spontaneously, loving boundlessly, when you encounter someone who's a tyrant, when you encounter someone who has harmful intentions, what do? Do you withhold your love? Say, oh, this person is not worth it. What? Not worth it? That's not wisdom. Sorry to say. And I think, for the most part, we think that's wisdom, and that's why we act upon. We have found the person whom it is right to hold back love. No, you have found the person who's most desperately needed. And this has to be a conviction that you have about everyone you encounter. When someone is being destructive to themselves, to society, it's because they're disconnected. They're disconnected from what? They're disconnected from love. the seed of goodness that they had when they were young was severely damaged. And what they need is not something to further damage them, not to further distance them. They need to be slowly brought back into the collective, into feeling connected again. And the only way that can be done is we extend love to them. And throw away that stuff in your mind that love is some sort of weakness where the thing you have to do is to just be nice. Sometimes being nice is the most cruel thing to do. Love benefits. It doesn't just bring nice, pleasant experiences. Sometimes, when you're truly connected with love, you will have the wisdom of knowing what is skillful to be done at that moment, and that's what you will trust to do. When we are connected, we allow love its limitlessness. We come to know certain things. We come to realize certain things. And this slowly builds up. And the knowledge that compassion needs, you start to have it. The compassion that loves need, the knowledge that compassion needs, the knowledge that loves need, the knowledge that about what's the appropriate action to be taken. Eventually, you will start to know them, because the barrier is breaking. And when we connect with that person who's very difficult, and we'll allow love to guide us, we will come to know what's the appropriate action to bring this person back, to reconnect this person, to help heal this person. I don't know to what degree I have fulfilled my purpose here, but at least I would like you to consider seriously, is there value in loving unconditionally? Is there value in fully accepting others as they are presently, understanding that there are no static beings, allowing love to reach a level of freedom where we sincerely care for each other without expecting anything in return. Because the purpose of loving is not what you will get from it. But it's in loving itself.